So what I was thinking of when I sort of jumped on this idea that was brought to us and asked staff to research it was envisioning more like an RV park that has the connections there that are available. One, because I think it's scalable, so you have a significant upfront cost for development, but then you can roll units in as you're able to afford to put them in there. The second thing is because they're mobile, if they fall into disrepair or they have something that needs to be done, they can be taken off-site and repaired so they're not impacting the community for that time being. And then the third is that, you know, eventually they could be rehabbed and sold off in place of bringing in a newer unit, but that way all of the individual units would have plumbing and kitchen facilities within them. Because what I envision this to be is that sort of interim step between that housing first, hey, we just need to get you shelter, more to we need to get your lifestyle normalized and have your own front door and your own living space, but a community that looks nice. And I think that, you know, you watch all of the different tiny home shows that are on TV right now, and they're building little mini luxury tiny homes. That's not what I'm envisioning, but I'm thinking you could definitely take something that would be quaint and cute and not seem like it's a quote-unquote homeless shelter. And then as far as what community facilities would be available on site, I mean, that's all I think cost would drive a lot of that as well. But so that's what I was envisioning is something that's not permanent foundation, that's not what I would equivocate to essentially dog houses that don't have any electricity or plumbing or anything else, and but something that provides a little bit of that dignity and normalization to sort of act as that interim step between triage and being able to move into a traditional housing type development.
Any kind of community talks, and in the circles that I've been in contact with, they've definitely found Elk Grove is a safer place for them to come. So there is a lot of people that have come down here, and you know the old saying, if you build it, they'll come. The word will get out there.
And I think there are ways that we can manage that and have managed that by trying to make sure that that all of our housing that we make available is available to folks who have a documented connection to Elk Grove. You are right. The population does talk. That's how some of our homeless end up leaving Elk Grove. They hear about other resources that they can get in Sacramento, and the reverse can happen too.
Okay. One more question.
Sorry, yeah.
Vice Mayor.
You just made me think of so maybe in terms of prioritizing, maybe it is that connection to Elk Grove, because we have to do something. You know, the problem will continue to worsen whether we provide services or not. So the people that are connected here, we have to find a solution, and so to maybe to minimize the effects of increasing like that, we prioritize it such that people who do have connections here get the services. So maybe that will, maybe that'll help a little bit.
Well, I think also when you look at when you talk about the connections, the roots that they do have to Elk Grove, and I think we've talked about this before, partly I think what we could do is help nurture those relationships with their family, friends, coworkers, because really it gets back to its community, right? I mean, yes. In the past, typically people through their churches, through their neighborhood groups, people take care of their own. They aren't always looking for someone on the outside to house them and feed them. And if I have any family or friends, I help take care of them. I mean, I've given people money. I've brought them in and had them stay with me during a tough period of time. And I think that's one of the things we have to do is help nurture those relationships. I know sometimes folks don't want to open up that they're going through tough times with their friends or family or coworkers, but that's who really needs to help raise them up.
Council deliberation and direction. I'd like to go up first.
And one of the things that in the services that the organization I work for provide is around making sure people have jobs. And that has been the key to getting them out of homelessness. The majority of the homeless folks that I serve and that I've seen come through my doors do have a mental disability. And so as we move forward and we talk about what we're going to do for this population, one of the things that I'm highly against is these permanent housing solutions, and that my idea is that it's a temporary solution and that we work with them to lift them out of this so that we can then bring in others. Otherwise, if we create all these houses and we have families that live there forever, what are we going to do with the next family that comes to us that is homeless? I also want to caution them that the whole if you build, they will all come. I agree with that, but I also want to make sure that we have steps for them to get out of these permanent housing solutions that we're calling for them, and that this really is a temporary so that they can do better, be better, so that we can help the next family that comes in.
One of the things, I've had the opportunity to talk with the chief about. One thing we don't want to do is we don't want to impact negatively the existing residents that are law-abiding citizens if there's somebody who happens to be homeless who chooses not to abide by the laws. I think everybody needs to be on the same page. I've said it before, I think, long-term, I think we need to be more of a regional effort. The county has some vacant facilities that with not a lot of work could be transitioned into immediate facilities to house people. You got Boys Ranch, and I believe you got the juvenile hall that shut down. It's basically already has dormitory facilities, already has full-blown kitchens, and couple that with the services that need to be done. Because if I never have been a favor of going and buying a $500,000 home in an existing neighborhood and converting that into transitional housing. I just don't think that's fair to the people that live there. One of the things, I don't know if anybody's investigated that would be even feasible, it's not in the city limit, but it's just outside our border, is the old Elk Grove Airport. There's a bunch of idle hangars out there and everything else that maybe there would be a feasibility with some tax write-offs or incentives for the owner of that property to be able to put some transitional housing at that facility.
Well, I agree with my friend and colleague, Councilman Detrick. It's not fair, that we go into the city or into a neighborhood and do something that they were never expecting. But none of us expected the issue of homelessness to get to where it's at today either, right? So I just think there needs to be a little bit more thought put into that before I'm ready to jump on board with a tiny home scenario. But I do think it's worth taking a look at. There's nothing that says we can't have multiple strategies, right? So we have one that appears to be working now. If the tiny homes option is another, we can try them out. Maybe they both work. Who knows?
Thank you. I'm going to go back to the very beginning of Sarah's presentation because it's an important point, and she was talking about the affordability of housing in general. And Randy, my family was building here in Elk Grove in the 70s and 80s, and my grandfather made the decision to put duplexes into our neighborhoods, not because he was a visionary with respect to affordable housing or because he had a super soft spot in his heart, but because he was a businessman. And those duplexes, we've retained ownership on them, and they are cash cows. We are now getting rents for half of a duplex that grossly exceed how much I paid for my first mortgage. You cannot buy the house that I bought in Elk Grove in 1999 in Elk Grove anymore for over 2 times, almost 3 times as much. I would like to continue to explore the tiny home solution. I would like to see a little more detail on potential models. I would not like to see any discussion of potential siting, because as we saw when this was first brought up, that has the tendency to derail it straight out of the gate before you even explore what it is. But, for me, it is about not permanent housing, because I agree with Councilmember Nguyen. I don't want to give people a safe landing spot. I want to give them a smooth runway, to take off, to go from. I don't want them to get complacent in their station in life. And I would like to explore the tiny homes. What other questions were we supposed to answer?
You have to feel like you're a part of the community to feel like you have value. Otherwise, if you place a number of individuals in these segments of the town or these fenced-off area, it's going to send the wrong message. These kids are going to grow up thinking that, oh, we're part of that population, and that's something that I certainly would not support. Now, with all due respect, Councilman Detrick mentioned the Boys Ranch, and I know where you're going with that. I mean, look at our existing resources. But one thing I would not support is tapping in the county to go to the Boys Ranch. If you haven't been out of the Boys Ranch, it's a prison, and it's got barbed wires, and it's got fences. And, again, consistent with that whole stigmatism, we don't want the population to feel along those lines. So where I am right now is I certainly don't want to rule anything out, but I think we should pursue the tiny house possibilities. I feel like I need more information on that, but at the same time, continue to explore what we already have that works in Elk Grove. Okay. All right. Anything else? No. Do you have enough?
Can I just clarify the direction a little bit? So in terms of the navigation hubs, is what I'm hearing that there's general support to do a second navigation hub with the single-family model scattered site that we've been using?
I would definitely support that. I think the navigation hub is pretty useful tool, I guess, to make sure people are getting what they need, whether it's mental health or how do we get them, how do we get them the services that they need? That's why I think Navigation Hub makes a lot of sense.
I support it.
Is that what you were asking, Sarah?
Yes.
Exactly.
That's one of the questions, yes.
Yeah,
For
the Navigation Hub, I mean, any support that we can give to help people navigate through the system I'm 100% support.
Well, but the navigation hub is continuing to buy single-family homes within existing
Exactly.
residents.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
You want to
See,
clarify navigation.
That's
I heard you say the navigation hub for the single family model. So we have one that we just did for families.
Yes.
You're looking to do another model with singles.
Single adults.
Single
yes.
adults, but the navigation hub within that.
So we would be purchasing another single-family home, as we've done Meadow House, Grace House, the new house, but it would be a navigation hub for single adults.
Right.
Whereas the one that we just purchased is for families. So we had in November, we had direction to do two houses. We've moved forward with the family one. We haven't moved forward with the singles house purchase yet. So what I'm hearing is that there's general consensus that we should keep the strategy for that.
Well, I just want to clarify to Councilman Detrick's point, the navigator is is a service we provide in the house that currently we just recently did was for families.
Yes. Yeah, the navigation component is a part of that house. There is a case management component of that. The navigator that we employ helps to put people in that house, and then they get case management to help them move on and out.
That's what I thought you were asking. Do you want us to continue with the navigation, that component in the house? You're asking for the whole house.
Asking
Yeah.
to move forward
I'm
on the
asking
Asking to buy
house.
another house
Yes.
in an existing
For
neighborhood.
single.
that's where I thought there was some confusion.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
About that.
So personally, I would still support that.
What kind of population would it serve other than being singles?
At this point, I don't think we've limited it. I think that there's a general need for single adults. I'm not sure that we have enough of a homeless veteran population to limit it to veterans. And under fair housing law, we don't really have the right to limit it to either men or women.
So I haven't seen with the newest purchase yet, but the two previous houses that we've opened up, I think once they're in place, they're without issue and are
Correct.
run very well.
Yes.
But as we saw with the last one, the neighborhood came out pretty strongly, and I felt like I was jamming something down their throat that they didn't want.
You did.
So,
Yeah.
well, to your point, you just said you were in favor of it after
As in
earlier in
favor
the
of the
night.
navigation hub, not
Well, and that's
not
why I
the
wanted
house.
to clarify. She's talking about buying another house, so I don't know that I'm okay with continuing that model.
So just a question though, because first of all, whether, back in the old days, it was multifamily housing, it was an apartment complex. Everybody would come and be upset because an apartment complex was going to be built next to them. If we go forward with a tiny home, we could delay it, but eventually a siting conversation is going to happen, and everybody's going to be upset because if it goes next to them. So at the end result, people are, no matter what we do, this type of use is still going to draw a lot of ire from folks, right? If you read in the paper recently, City of Sacramento is doing their part about looking around the area, and I'm sure they're going to run into these same types of problems. So I guess this is, no matter what, we're going to face unhappy residents with what we do. And so I'm going back to a proven model that we have so far, and we're gonna feel the blunt of the community no matter what. Jen, just can you remind me what was the total cost if we go forward with the single person version?
So that, we had a total of $2 million budgeted for the navigation hubs. We have an additional $1 million that we're kind of talking about for tiny homes or other partnership. But so the $2 million, we have about $1 million of that allocated. We purchased the Moon Creek house, and we need the money to operate it for about 10 years. So right now we have $1 million left. We have enough money to acquire a house and then to operate it for the 10-year time frame.
So the $1 million could be for tiny homes, and then...
Yes, it could. We could change that strategy.
If I can, real quick, just to go back to the navigation hubs, remind me how the navigation hub differs from the the transitional housing.
Sure. The transitional housing is intended for people to stay 6 months to a year. The navigation hub is a quicker move in, less interview process to move in, and a quicker move out, ideally. So as soon as somebody finds permanent housing, they would move out. In the transitional housing, it's generally expected that singles will stay about 6 months, maybe a little longer. Families will stay 9 to 12 months, usually the length of the school year, as they work through a program. So with the transitional housing, the focus is on finding people who can, with the time frame of assistance, become self-sufficient. With the navigation hub, there's less emphasis on workforce development and self-sufficiency, and more emphasis on let's just get you housed.
Yeah. Well, we would necessarily come back before purchasing a house anyways. We need council approval for that.
Yeah.
I think the question that your staff is asking is, do you want us to even continue towards that path? And we hear two of you saying yes, but I don't think I've heard a third person saying stay on course on that. So I guess what's the will of the council?
Can you tell me again the option? So it's either, and I'm sorry, because I think you guys just confused me a little bit more. The first option is either to purchase another home, and it would be a navigator hub, and it would be for singles.
Yes.
And then the second option with that would be?
To pull the funding and hold it for something else, like adding it to the tiny homes discussion or working on partnering with a developer to incorporate it into an existing project or a planned project. Okay.
Yeah, but you don't know what that partnership looks like or how viable that partnership is.
That's what they're going to investigate.
Yeah, out of all the alternative options, I don't know what any of them look like, but I want to have a better understanding of that before I continue doing what we've always done. I know what that looks like.
Okay.
So one of the options, it sounds like there's not support to continue with the purchase of the existing single-family homes, because we've only had two.
Now.
Not now. It could be an option in the future. There is support to continue to explore the tiny home model, what that might look like using the existing funds. So potentially we could have up to $2 million for a tiny home solution.
Yeah.
Another, I guess, small modification to that could be is if you like the nonprofit developer partnership idea, where it would be a unit or a multifamily complex that's developed for affordable housing, and a portion of that becomes some type of housing for homeless, we could explore that simultaneously at the same time as the tiny home, because there are nonprofits in the Sacramento region that have successfully built those kinds of units. Sarah gave a couple different examples in her presentation, so we're pretty confident that if you wanted to go down that path, we'd be able to have success in making that happen. And I think one of the advantages of that project over all the other ones is the siting issue is not nearly as bad because it's already an existing multifamily site. It's already going to be most likely affordable housing. So people that live there already know that they're buying into a unit that's next door to an affordable housing unit. And to just add a homelessness component is not a very big change to that. And so whereas the existing single-family homes or the tiny homes, siting is going to be a huge issue. Coupling it with a nonprofit developer as part of a future multifamily project is probably the least controversial of the
I agree.
Well,
I'm
and
sold.
I think there are other options with other challenges and other opportunities that we ought to explore before we go to look at purchasing
Right.
another house.
Think you have enough?
Can I also encourage that we work with Hearts and other nonprofit organizations that are represented in this room here to find a good solution for our community?
I thought we all worked with heart.
I just wanted to make sure I repeated it.
But this one.
I need a confirmation. You got enough?
We will certainly continue
All
to
right.
work with Hart. So we will continue to research tiny homes then, and we will also look at partnering with a developer.
Excellent.
And bring that back in the future.
All right. We'll adjourn at 8:23. Thank you.